And hello, everybody. It is the Dark Conservatarian, and I am back with a guest that I have had on before, that being Austin, the Mjollnir Man. Say hello, Mjollnir Man.
Hello, everybody. I do an introduction. Okay, I'm just gonna take these shades off. It's too much trouble. Yeah, I think I gave an introduction here before. My name is Mjollnir Man. I'm just now getting back into making videos. Been making videos for about I don't know, probably about a half decade now on this channel. Um, I used to be a right wing libertarian. I'd probably consider myself more of a left wing libertarian at this juncture. And I'm getting back into making political commentary after about a 2 year hiatus. And I also do music. And if you want to follow me on SoundCloud or Twitter, you can go to my channel. I have the links in the description. I also just opened a BitChute account over some lovely YouTube drama.
Okay, one second if anybody hears reverb right now. Alright, I'm just trying to, get the stream link here and start sharing it around. And, there it is to you if you want it. So, anyway, we were just talking off air, everybody, about some of the past live streams and interviews that Mjollnir Man has watched of mine. So, you were saying when we were off air, Austin?
Oh yeah. I was watching the what's it called? Yeah, I was watching the one. I didn't watch the whole stream. I just saw the one clip you had where it's like sparring with the aircraft Sparky. I think it's what it's called.
Ah, yeah, he did spar with Aircraft Sparky on pedophilia and the LGBT com, as I like to initialize it as.
I don't. I don't know. I don't really understand why this narrative is getting pushed so much by people with the whole pedophilia included in the LGBT community. Like I'm sorry, like it just seems like either way it's sort of like a baseless claim because no matter what way you look at it, you don't really have statistics to prove someone wrong on that, but you also don't have statistics to disprove. Or did
Yeah.
I say that wrong? I mean, it's just one of those things where it just seems like someone's kind of pulled it out of their. Well, I don't know if you allow cursing on your stream or not, so I just won't.
No, I allow cursing, of course.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
give a
So
crap.
yeah, it just pretty much seems like something where people are just kind of pulling stuff out of their ass, and I don't really get why. Like I said before, this is such a huge issue with some people because I remember Humane Mind kind of pushing this narrative too. Um.
Yeah, back in February, that was Aircraft Sparky as well. He actually brought it up first, and then Humane rode on that bandwagon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess, like, because with Aircraft Sparky, I was very surprised to see him, and I don't really know if he's considered part of the Poor Bastards. Is he? Or, I mean,
Eh,
I don't really keep up on the Poor Bastards too much.
we have we associate with him a little bit closer than Humane Mind does, but that's mostly because Humane is kind of bitter about some stuff. But
Yeah, I
he's
understand that,
kind
but
of he's kind of I guess I'm not so sure. The Poor Bastards is so scattered right now, it's ridiculous. It might as well
yeah,
say that the Poor Bastards is no longer
yeah,
existent. But
it just kind of seems like a totally decentralized community. Because when
yeah,
I was a part of it, it was a lot more organized. I will say that much.
yeah,
But I remember seeing a video of his in like 2016. Somehow he was able to like conduct an interview with TJ Kirk, the amazing atheist. I don't know if you've seen that.
really. No, I did
Yeah.
not. I haven't seen any of
I
Sparky's
may be
content.
mistaking him, but I have to say it has to be him because the profile, like the little channel icon was the same. It was the same name. He looked the same. I could probably dig it up pretty soon here, but
So
I know at one point he did conduct an interview with TJ, the Amazing Atheist,
he
which was a
interviewed
total
TJ.
shock to me. I believe so, yeah.
Oh, I did not know if it was the
'Cause-
opposite. And poor and or excuse me, drunken peasants had actually interviewed him. or whatever.
No, it was actually on Aircraft Sparky's channel. Like he did a
Ah,
one-on-one interview with TJ, and that's why it was a total shock to me. It's like because it wasn't like the first instance I'd seen someone like on here before that I guess is a little closer in the internet neighborhood now, but it just struck me as odd. But he's kind of to me it's like the same principle of like Owen McDonald. I've never actively engaged with Owen ever. But I do observe him
it's
and
probably best for your health.
him and Aircraft Sparky at a far distance, I guess you could say. And I would just have to say, like, a lot of his views, especially concerning like the LGBT community, just seem grossly ignorant.
Yeah.
I just it just seems a little, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, there's no scientific data for either way on that issue, but I have seen plenty enough Twitter polls of where that generally the majority seems to be voting against pedophilia when in regards to the LGBT community. Like, how many of you LGBT people are supportive of pedophilia, or how many of you consider the LGBT community to be, closely intertwined with pedophilia? It was always against those notions and whatnot.
yeah.
I mean,
No,
it's not very scientific, so I could not convince people like Aircraft Sparky or Humane Mind with those, but it's still like evidence enough for me, I guess. But the fact that they have no statistical data on this is what really has me unconvinced on that issue. It's just an overly gross generalization. But
yeah,
what?
I don't really know how that whole thing started. The only thing I could really guess is like, okay, so Milo Yiannopoulos, you know how he pretty much got taken down because of his comments
On pedophilia?
yeah, pederasty, pedophilia, and then I think George Takei came out about a decade before Milo even said anything about this, where he had some experiences with a summer camp counselor that was a few years older than him, um, and from their point of view, they make it seem like that type of relationship was kind of beneficial to them, kind of understanding their sexuality, but you
Ugh.
know rest be assured, like you don't see a lot of like heterosexual people saying the same thing, but there are heterosexual people that say the same thing about it too. I mean, there's people that are like, yeah, I had sex with my English teacher when I was like 15, and you know, they talk about it in a good light. And then there's some people that come to the realization that they were totally taken advantage of. So,
Yeah, there might not be wait, sorry. So let's reiterate that you're saying that that there's not as many heterosexual people that are kind of borderline promoting that kind of shit, or am I
um,
confusing you?
I think maybe perhaps just a smidge, but what I'm trying to say is like it seems like the same on both fields. Like there are people who like brag about like that are heterosexual having sex at like an extremely young age. Like I know people who bragged personally at like losing their virginity when they were like 13,
Mm.
12. um but to me, I think it's probably the same across both fields in terms of numbers. I just think maybe
Mm-hmm.
because it is a homosexual relationship, it's perhaps a bit more taboo, and that's why there's more focus on that. I mean, sure, like if Milo was straight and saying the same stuff, he probably still would have been condemned to some degree. Or if George
Yeah.
Takei was straight and saying the same stuff, he would have definitely been condemned. But I do think this kind of speaks a lot to maybe some preconceived prejudice among some people. I'm not going to say like I remember in that stream like Aircraft Sparky said, well, I'm not like a homophobe. I don't really care what two consenting adults do behind closed doors, but I do think you can not be okay with something and still not really care if people do it. Like you don't have to have like an authoritarian attitude towards something.
Mm. Yeah, he doesn't take an authoritarian attitude towards it. Although, if somebody was to go other way and say that aircraft Sparky or even Humane Mind, who isn't authoritarian on the issue either, but they're still philosophically and their rhetoric is absolutely disgusting regarding this issue still. If somebody else wants to call them homophobic, I don't think I have any defense for that. I don't know if I would do it, but GeoCon, have you seen my interview with the geoconservative at all?
That was one I meant to click on. I don't think I got around to watching that one though.
Mm-hmm. But him, I would say is kind. Yeah, he does seem kind of homophobic, seemingly, especially because of the fact that he wants to like restrict homosexuality. Like he wants any homosexual interactions, like kissing and whatnot. You know, those kinds of things. He wants to like put them in these things called red light districts, quote unquote. So basically, the straight people. What I'm getting from that is that the straight people, it's okay if they like do, excuse me, do intercourse on a public street, but the homosexual people, not really. And one of the arguments that he brought as to why he thinks that there's some moral justification for it is because if two homo people were to do that, they would like it would constitute as some moral pollution, quote unquote. And I was thinking to myself, well, somebody can consider your speech to be moral pollution. So does that justify them banning you from speaking on the public square? I did not word it exactly like that, but you get the point.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird to see. I don't know. You just kind of come across a lot of personalities here on the internet. Like I was
mm-hmm.
pretty surprised. The one that surprised me the most, who I actually discovered via, I believe it was either a debate or an interview conducted on your channel. I'm sure because I was in an S-Man stream not too long ago, and he kind of came in at the end and just was trying to like argue some weird point. I didn't really know what direction he was trying to go in, but
Would his
I'm
name be
sure.
Voltaire?
Yeah, it was like what, Frederick von Voltaire or something like that.
Frederick Voltaire Bastiat. Yeah, the guy is kind of weird with the way that he approaches his philosophy and whatnot. It just kind of chalks up a good portion of the time to being nothing but word salad.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And plus, the guy kind of like he has this way where he says like the same thing three different ways before he finishes making his point. I kind of noticed that in the stream, and he just came out of nowhere. And I'm not gonna say he was attacking Kotenru, but he was definitely coming very aggressively towards him, and it really had no rhyme or reason, and I just don't really
Hmm.
think it had any place in the stream because towards the end there we were just joking around and having fun, but that
Vol-
was the third Democratic debate stream that S-Man just had on his channel not too long ago.
I might have to watch that now because I did notice that there was like a wide variety of people that joined at multiple different times throughout that
Yeah.
stream. But I tried listening to it at first, but then I kind of tuned out as soon as I figured, yeah, they're not gonna go back to reviewing the debate because it was like the first 10 to 30 minutes they were reviewing the debate, and then it just for the next 2 hours or something like that became more of a chill stream. I mean,
Yeah,
S-Man can do what he wants, but anyway,
I would say like
I'll still have to like watch
yeah.
it though.
Well, I will have to warn you. I don't think we got too far into that on air, because there was probably like a 30-minute chunk that was off air. Because I think what happened was S-Man maybe didn't really realize like what was going on, and it just seems like he quietly like deaded the stream, and then it was just like an off air hangout for like 30 minutes, and I really didn't know what direction it was taking. It was getting late, so I just turned off the computer and went to bed.
Oh, okay. Well,
But there's a chunk of it on there for reference.
yeah. So Voltaire, I only like interviewed him one time, and oh, well, actually, there was like another time that I did like mm, moderate a debate between him and some other members of the Poor Bastards.
I haven't really seen too much of him in like debates per se. I just really know him from your channel, to be honest. That's
Mm.
really the only place I saw, because I remember kind of getting into it with him in the comments a little bit, because I don't know. I think it's a little ludicrous to suggest that the
That
working poor do not have a political voice in the country, but that's just me.
yeah. What's even more ridiculous than that though is that he doesn't want women to be allowed to vote. Period.
Oh yeah, that's probably like that Stefan Molyneux brand of bullshit.
Something like that. I'm not
Where he,
sure.
he sits in front of the camera in like his little ivory tower for an hour and a half on his little free domain radio. Oh, you see, after women got the right to vote, the Great Depression happened. It's like, dude, chill.
Like, it's one thing for you to believe that only property owners should be allowed to vote, but to say that not even female property owners can vote, that's totally different. Like, you take it into like a sexist point of view. Like I've told Voltaire as well. Like if you want to have a propertarian, I guess is what it would be called, a propertarian form of voting system, well then you can't have that. Just if you allow even minorities and women to vote as soon as they are like the sole owner of property as well. I mean,
Yeah,
just to make it no longer a debate about how sexist you are, Voltaire.
it just kind of seems like he's trying to rewind the clock a little bit because
Mm.
his system for voting rights kind of seems like probably like the first 70 years of the United States, minus the fact I'm sure because he said he was an African American, right?
Yeah, he's black.
So he probably minus the only white property owners with so much property. So I guess I could understand like
He'd probably be for only male property owners, males of all colors, but it still kind of boils down to sexism by definition.
oh yeah, I mean you can't really say something like that and not be sexist. I mean
So, but anyway, if there was nothing else that you wanted to talk about in regards to that, I think I will want us to segue onto the issue that this stream is titled after.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that being about immigration, legal, illegal immigration, the wall, and all that other sorts of stuff. And we have 5 people watching, but nobody chatting. So, hello everybody. Tell me that you're awake. But anyway, so tell me what your opinion on immigration is. Like, are you for open borders? Are you for some border security? Are you for amnesty, against amnesty? And how much border security do you want? Like, go on.
So in terms of borders, I think it's kind of counterproductive to erect like a giant wall. I mean, if people are like really concerned for per se, like a lot of people seem to be concerned with just the fact that it could not be the greatest uh how do I want to say this? Greatest way money can be spent. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be ways that people are going to find to bypass this.
Mm-hmm.
But
To get around the wall? Anybody
yeah,
who wants to immigrate into here?
I would probably rather say like maybe like not just simply like a chain link fence, but like the fence system where it's those giant stakes like going like 12 feet up in the air. I would think it would probably make more sense to shift from the wall and just make more employment opportunities via the border patrol. It just seems like it would make a lot more sense just to have a lot more patrolmen instead of just a behemoth wall.
Mm.
Um, as far as illegal immigrants go, I mean we can do like two things. I guess we can still go like Django guns blazing and continue to deport these people, but as I'm reading more and more, the system just kind of keeps flopping on itself with the amount of actual documented citizens who get deported and basically become people with no representation from any state overnight. Um, I think we're kind of having to come to a point where granting asylum's probably the only feasible and probably cheapest solution. I think if we do like a simple vetting process, perhaps switch this I system to more of a system where we go and interview these people and check their backgrounds, make sure they don't have any ties to like any
Drug cartels.
criminal enterprises, or don't have like a violent offense background in, say, the country they came from. Then sure, they can have a shot at citizenship. But I think it speaks with a larger problem of the economic conditions of Mexico. And I know a lot of people would say like it's not our problem, but it is. I mean, they are our southern border. I mean, we have uh, Canada to the north, and they seem to be doing just fine as well. You don't really see a huge influx of people flooding over the southern border of Canada to getting into the United States.
Hmm.
So I think we should maybe shift from these more drastic measures such as walls, and maybe try to come to terms with the agreements that would probably help the Mexican economy more. Because I know a lot of people are a bit pissed off with, say, like outsourcing occupations or jobs of that nature. But as we see in like China, there's, oh, we have a lot of debt, but it's not just because the money's not coming back that it's not working out. See, they have the American money, and they usually in turn invest in like land and or property or businesses in the United States is what we tend to see. So just because it's not um, coming back in the form of cash doesn't mean it's not coming back.
Okay. So, you would say that overall you are for moderate border control, just not a wall. You're for more security, but
Yeah, I think every state has as long as we're going to live in a state, then yeah, I do think borders should be a necessary enforced,
mhm.
boundary. Now, if we wanted to shift and say like a stateless society, well, obviously people can come and go as they please, but
Except for
that's
on
not right.
people's privately owned property. But yeah, I get your
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess that is kind of how I would approach it right there. The thing that I have about the wall, though, the thing that would probably make me in favor of the wall is if somebody was to like tell me the numbers of how long it would take for the wall to make back its money worth in like saved welfare money. Because I mean, I know that some people like to say that illegal immigrants don't take any welfare, but they do, as I have read. Like, I would have to like actually pull up the video where I read this, but
Yeah, I've been trying to find
yeah.
that number. I usually debate with far less intelligent individuals. Um,
But
so usually what
so
happens is I get these outlandish statements that say like 99+% of illegal immigrants are like
I
leeching off the welfare system, and it's
I
like,
don't
come
know
on,
if
dude, where'd you
it's
get that? Did you
I
get
don't know
that
if
from
it's
like,
99.
did you get that from Breitbart, dog?
Yeah, so suppose underneath one of my videos somebody claimed that it was like a trillion in welfare that they take or something like that, or something in the high billions. Let me try to see what
I mean, yeah, I'm not,
six point
yeah.
one. Okay, wait. Oh, okay. 6.1 million illegals filed taxes in U.S. Many didn't pay but received refunds. This is like the video that I was talking about. Don't know if you can see or not.
Um,
You
I'm
can
not.
like see it via the
Yeah, I
stream
got the
browser.
stream up, but I don't know how long the debate, I mean, the delay is. Yeah, it just pulled up on my screen.
Yeah,
Six
that's.
point one million illegals. So
It doesn't show
obviously,
an actual number, but I think later on in the article that I have read, it does mention an actual number. But still, that goes to show that there is some welfare being taken. But the
it is a.
question,
I will give you this because it is a significant amount. Because usually the agreed upon number. I mean, obviously you're not gonna
is
have a concrete number, but usually it's around 13 million people.
yeah, 10 to 13 million illegals currently in the country. But as I was like trying to say in regards to welfare spending, I mean, my question with the wall is, how long would it take for the wall to make back its money's worth in welfare spending? Like, the higher the amount of welfare money that it is found that is being spent on illegal immigrants, the quicker, or more specifically by illegal immigrants that are just basically jumping the border. And we're not talking about people overstaying their visas. Obviously, the wall would not solve those people, but that
Yeah.
aside, how many people jumping the border, just sneaking on past, are taking welfare money, and how much are they taking? If it's a higher amount, then in a shorter amount of time, the wall would make back its money's worth. But as far as I know, there is no like papers or anything on that. This is a question that I asked Aircraft Sparky as well, because he said supposedly that building the wall would be fiscally conservative. And my thought on that is that in theory that might be a case, but there might be a case that it is fiscally conservative. But here's the thing, you have to actually provide a citation as to how long it would take for the wall to make back its money's worth and ultimately save money in the long term, supposedly. In the short term, it obviously wouldn't save money because, as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned for right now, if we were to like build a wall, that is like more than 1 year's worth of welfare spending on the current illegal immigrants that we have. You know.
Yeah. That's another thing. It just seems like Aircraft Sparky's really good at making these arguments where you can't really provide proper statistics. Um, so
And neither does
that's
he.
that's a stimulation or a simulation. I mean, that I don't really think we could really properly put out. I see a lot of people who like posit that maybe it'll pay itself off in like 10 years, but to me, like, running that game and those hypotheticals is really arbitrary and probably serves whatever purpose it needs to serve, because I could probably go on and say like, oh, it'll take forever to pay itself off, and then someone else could say, oh, it'll only be like a couple years.
Right. So I guess one question that I'll ask you is regarding minimum wage. Like, what's your opinion on because minimum wage is kind of an issue that is attached to illegal immigration and illegal immigrants. Are you for there being an existence of a minimum wage?
mm, uh at this point I would say so, yes.
Okay.
I will probably burn your ears, but I would have to say that I do think that the a an increase of the minimum wage to about $15 an hour would probably be beneficial. Um, as we see now, current statistics state that as of now, you would need to, on average, make around $16.08 an hour just to live in an American city on average. So, with that being said, there are cities in that average that would fall below. Like you have Cincinnati, you'd probably need to make about $14 an hour to survive there pretty well. And then you have places in obviously like California is going to be more of a higher rate. I think you need
Yeah.
to make the most money in probably New York City, but I know like places like San Francisco, you're looking at like $23 base minimum just to be able to survive. There are a lot of arguments that I argue against with that. I think one of the biggest things
The well,
is probably
I kind of want
automation.
to
Okay, yeah,
I
go
kind of
ahead.
want to slow you down a bit there. I mean, we'll talk about automation in a bit, as you kind of wanted to mention, and minimum wage will be tied to that. But the reason why I mention minimum wage is because you know that with the existence of the minimum wage, that puts like the legal citizen at a competitive disadvantage with illegal immigrants because illegal immigrants, they typically get paid under the table. They are able to get paid under the table by their managers, bosses, and whatnot. So therefore, they're able to get paid lesser than minimum wage without really getting caught most of the time, as far as I'm concerned, anyways. And that kind of incentivizes the managers to want to hire the illegal immigrant over the legal citizen. And it might not even work. It might not even matter as how much work ethic the two have. Say if they
Yeah,
have like an equal work ethic, they're obviously going to pay for the they're going to hire the cheaper working one, or the one that they're able to hire for a lower wage anyways.
Well,
my
yeah,
my thought is that illegal immigration would be a little less of an issue if the minimum wage did not exist. But because of the fact that the minimum wage does exist, that kind of hurts people's competitiveness in the workforce and whatnot, and affects their wages.
well, I would have to say, for instance, this example you've brought forth. I mean, for one, this is, well, I mean, we can just say this is an illegal business practice for one.
Yeah.
I think if you are providing employment opportunities to legal citizens or citizens of other nations that have come over on a work visa, I do think they do need at least a $15 an hour minimum wage. Given just the fact that the cost of living has inflated so much, we need to catch up with that. But in terms of, these people out here that are employing these vast swaths of illegal immigrant workers, I mean, I do think these places get busted a lot more than what is claimed. See, like
Hmm.
in my neck of the woods, there's like a lot of Asian massage parlors. No dirty jokes attached to this, but usually what ends up happening is these places get busted by usually ICE, because they're harboring like illegal and employing illegally immigrated like Laotians or Chinese people. Um, and usually that's connected usually to either some type of sex trafficking ring or some
Huh.
type of drug dealing ring. That's totally outside of what we're talking about. I just felt like bringing that up. But I
Hmm.
mean, I think there needs to be more pressure on the employers than the employees. A lot of people are mad at the illegal immigrants, but how are you going to get mad at illegal immigrants for assuming these positions when it's really just the employer, you know, hand over fist giving them the position? I mean, yeah, you can cut corners all day, but there's a point where you need to be held accountable. I mean, they're contributing to this problem more than just an average
Yeah.
citizen, I would say.
Well, nobody is condoning the managers and the business owners. Surely not. I mean, I think that they should be held to accountability for their sleaziness, their
Yeah.
dishonest business practices. But I just think that overall it would become less of an issue. ICE would not have to get involved, like you kind of mentioned, for example, there. And none of this would have to be as much of an issue if the minimum wage did not exist. But hey, I, you're still for the minimum wage, though, I presume. But anyway,
Yes. But I mean, it's
I
just
do
a
not
very
know where
different
I.
argument. I usually have like very different arguments, and that I usually have to pull up like the history of the minimum wage and all this. But I'm going into this assuming you probably know the history of the minimum wage and why this is.
Somewhat. I think what I recall is that in the 60s, the minimum wage was able to get you a little bit further in life than now.
So like 1968, if we use real dollars, we can observe that the minimum wage that they were making at the time would have been equated to probably around I believe the figure is about 12.26 in today's money. Using real dollars today, using the current minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, I believe they said that is around less than $1.50 in real dollars.
Hmm.
Um, so the minimum wage was enacted in the 30s, basically to stabilize a post-depression economy. This was literally for the expressed purpose of the most minimum amount a person can make per hour with the given rate of inflation, that someone could live extremely comfortably. So with that being said, if we're going to have the minimum wage, I think people need to have better arguments. I'm not saying you're one of these people. I'm just saying in general. I usually run into people who like to tout the lines that it's just like it's just a starting wage for teeny boppers trying to make some
Yeah.
pocket change. And it's like the first problem with that is only less than a quarter of the workforce on minimum wage are teenagers, for one. Most of these places now, like,
Yeah, and then
say, like, if you work,
less than a tenth of the workforce actually makes minimum wage. Most of them go having more than that. Night Shift is in the chat. He says, "Nice mustache, rocking the Zorro look." Thank you, Night Shift. But sorry, you were saying, Austin.
I was just saying, like, when people try to make this point that it's just for kids and stuff. I mean, this is a totally ill-informed point. I'm still trying to figure out where the origin of this talking point came from.
That it's for just a starting wage.
Yeah, like when people say, "Oh, it's just a starting wage," and that might be the common stereotype of a minimum wage worker is like a spotty-faced teenager flipping burgers. But the vast majority of people on the federal minimum wage or in a minimum wage in their state are adults. Um, and combined with the express purpose of the minimum wage to be a literal minimum living wage. Um, I mean, we have to take that into more consideration. So I usually have these huge debates where I have to throw up the history, and it's just paragraphs long. My thumbs
Mm.
get tired.
As far as the whole argument of it's just a starting wage, I mean, I sympathize with regular normie conservatives when it comes to that argument, but I mean, I get the sympathies, but overall, I just advocate for getting rid of it entirely. But
May
and that
may
might not have been the true first intent of the minimum wage, but that's as far as I'm concerned, regular conservatives they have adopted it for that purpose.
Oh yeah, this for sure. I mean, I'm just curious here. So if you're for abolishing, say, a minimum wage, what would you say this would look like? Would you perhaps adopt more of like a system in perhaps I think it is Denmark maybe or Norway that does not have a federally set minimum wage, but usually this was done because the unions over there were scared that that would outcompete with them being able to bargain. Are you maybe advocating for more of a unionized workers or just a total?
Um, as far as unions go, I am all for the allowing the existence of private unions, anyways. And as long as the unions they do not infringe upon anyone else's rights in their union practices, that's all fine, well and good. But if they say start barging in on some business owner's private property, start damaging and whatnot, that's when I have a problem. But that aside, I don't know what the full point is that you're trying to get at with
Uh,
Denmark and whatnot with the
Well,
unions and.
I'm trying to see like your vision perhaps of what a state or maybe I should just say the United States without a minimum wage because I can't remember which Scandinavian nation it was. I do want to say it was Norway because they are like filthy rich over there. Actually, like a beer costs like $20 over there. But anyways, but that's just because they can afford it. They got so much money. But I believe it's them that do not have a minimum wage, and this was purposely the case. The unions were pushing against having a set minimum wage because they thought it would interfere with their bargaining power. So they wanted to
Hmm.
maximize their bargaining power. But in Norway,
Right.
say like we worked
Makes
at
sense.
McDonald's, there's like 16-year-olds working at McDonald's in Norway that are part of a private union.
And so what? They would be making a minimum wage that, or they'd be making a wage that is to the equivalent of just $5, $5 per hour.
Uh, they well over in Norway they would make something that would equate to maybe like I think like $12 an hour here. Where if you
Okay.
go here to the States and try to, they might bump you like 75 cents above the minimum wage. I mean, my state it follows the same minimum wage as the federal law. We're very much a
Mm-hmm.
federal law and order state, so we don't really do any increases like that unless it's federally mandated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that
Um,
Kansas has nothing over 725 itself.
Yeah, so a lot of places try to. make themselves look more appealing. Like my first job, I was paid like 7.75 an hour. My second job, I was at the minimum wage for a short period of time. That was unbearable, but you know.
Um, hmm. You say it like hurts their bargaining power, the existence of a minimum wage, and that does make sense because the minimum wage kind of hurts competition in the area of what wage that a worker can work at. Like they're not able to start off at say $6 an hour just to like appeal more to the manager and then show their stuff during employment so that they can work their way up to something that's over the current minimum wage that America has. But
Okay,
I'm just wondering of what you mean by bargaining power. Like, what powers do they take since the minimum wage does not exist in Scandinavia or Norway, anyways, that you mentioned?
so like what I'm trying to say is that because they don't have any set standard for wages, they can pretty much just ask for what they want, and it's not going to come off as like too costly because there also isn't a force that isn't unionized that survives off of said minimum wage or maybe just above a minimum wage. So there's really no competition there in terms of a wage to battle, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, like, would you possibly see in this hypothetical non-minimum wage United States, would there be a lot more union interactions with employers? Would there be a lot more formed unions? Like I said, the McDonald's union or something like that. Would that be probably a reality in your?
If what the question that you're implying is, would there be a government to help speed along and make more union interactions go? No, not necessarily. And as far as private interactions go, I do not have the prediction or whatnot if there would be more union interactions. But the scenario that you just mentioned there, I'm for allowing that to happen with private unions and so forth. I don't think that any unions should be like forcefully shut down by the government or anyone else as long as they are not harming upon anyone else's rights. And if the union wants to like collectively put their heads together and determine how are they going to work with the company that they are under, how are they going to get the employees better off in that company, then yeah, that's totally cool, allow them to do that. But government actions after the minimum wage is abolished, should there be any further government action after that regarding unions? No, I don't believe in that.
I've got just two more questions really on this point, and then we can just move on. So in terms of taking away this minimum wage, what what do you think would happen to say like the middle class? Because I see a lot of people saying nothing would happen. I see a lot of people saying it would increasingly shrink the middle class. Because I
Hmm.
think what people are very uh, scared of in this scenario is perhaps maybe like a robber baron type of thing where we have this increasingly shortening gap between working class people are like the intermediary between the wealthy and the poor. So if this class starts to shrink more, really it's just going to be poor people and rich people.
Hmm. Well, I'm not so sure of what would happen to the middle class, honestly. But the middle class, there are like multiple different groups of people as to what makes up the middle class. Some of them are small business owners. Some of them are like high-end managers underneath a larger corporation. As far as the small business owning middle class person, they would be able to compete better in the market and their budgets would be more flexible in what wages they can pay a certain employee. Like they have like a smaller budget first off, but they need some employees to help along. They cannot afford a 7.25 hour wage like it currently is right now. But instead, if the minimum wage was abolished, they would pay something lower than that to get the employees started off. And as soon as production picked up more, they would have more flexibility eventually to pay their employee higher than what the current minimum wage is in this rhetorical situation that we're talking about.
Yes.
As far as like middle class people that work underneath a larger corporation or whatever, I don't think the minimum wage would really affect them necessarily, but the small business owner, it would. And actually, here's another side of this argument that I just thought of. One thing that I generally hear about Walmart and some other corporations for that matter is that they want a higher minimum wage because ultimately a higher minimum wage hurts their smaller business competition to where that they have to like lay off workers, lay off like give them smaller hours and whatnot. Just it hurts their business. Larger corporations they can like easily enough digest a higher minimum wage. It's the
Yeah.
small businesses that people on the right are most concerned about, and the existence of a minimum wage and the possibility of it getting raised that would hurt their competition, and so therefore they want it. So there's that end of that argument.
Well, okay. I would have to say, so a lot of rhetoric I see on the right wing is all about competition. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question would be, why would it really matter if a small business could survive or not, if it's all in the name of, the competition of the free market? I mean, I
What?
get that what I'm saying is like, so we have a small business that, I don't know, let's just say like a bookstore, and then, Walmart just all of a sudden has like a huge library department. They just have a bunch of books everywhere, and they have like a little book department now. So would that, I mean, why would it matter, say, if like a smaller business was outcompeted? Because from what I see, it just seems like right wing rhetoric is usually centered around all about competition. So wouldn't
Yeah.
that just sort of seem more of like, I wouldn't say like nanny state, but wouldn't that just kind of seem like coddling small businesses? I mean,
No. A lack. The fact that the minimum wage would be abolished, that would be a lack of action from the government. So therefore, there wouldn't be any coddling. Coddling would have to be active action, like providing welfare, something like that, for example.
well, okay, I was addressing more of your statement about how Walmart and other corporations are eager for like this $15 minimum wage increase because it would hurt their smaller business competitors. That's more of what I was asking on.
Okay, well, I don't know if I would use the word coddling that the government is doing to the bigger corporations, but they are definitely, in a way, giving them an advantage over their smaller business competitors, artificially affecting the market by increasing minimum wage and so forth.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, because like if it's technically competition, I mean, in my eyes, from what I'm hearing, like why would it matter to you personally if, like, say Walmart was able to like easily outcompete, like, let's say like 1,000 smaller stores, like family owned chains or like regional chains or even just like mom and pop shops, when
Why would it matter to me? Because you're presuming that I don't own a small business?
do you own a small business?
No, I don't, but I'm just trying to pry at this question right here. Like, I don't know why you frame in your question this way to where it's like, why does it matter to you? Is that
Well, I'm saying like with the I'm going to assume like you are in favor of free market competition.
yeah?
Um, my whole question is asking like, why would it matter if, say, Walmart was able to outcompete like a bunch of small businesses if it's just competition? Obviously, Walmart can afford to do this, and these small corporations can't in this scenario.
Well, it
That's what
would
I'm trying.
matter. It would. I guess overall, ultimately, it would not matter directly to me personally because right now I am, as of currently, working above minimum wage, although slightly below the $15 range. But anyway, um, as far as competition goes, if it was to like kill small businesses, what if there was some small business that I like, excuse me, going too often? Like, there's like this video game bar here in Wichita. I only presume that they're a small business and would not be able to digest as well a $15 minimum wage. So that would be how it kind of, in a way, in an indirect way, kind of affect me. But um, I guess ultimately it doesn't matter to me personally whether it affects me or not. I'm just for the consistent principle of that I don't want people's private property rights, and I know that people like look at minimum wage as more of a freedom of association type way. I look at it as both ways, both freedom of association and private property rights. I don't believe in having people's private property rights intervened with in that area, and that the government tells you how to run your business. And say if sometime in the future I do want to start my own business, I advocate for a higher minimum wage now, or don't care about minimum wage. But in the future, if I was to start a small business, I would be looking back on myself and thinking, oh man, I wish I did speak out against the minimum wage raise.
Well, yeah, I could definitely see that, but I guess the basically what I was just saying is like, yeah, I mean, if it's competitive, I don't really see why anybody in the scenario would really have an issue with it. I guess, yeah, if you frequent small businesses, it will affect you, but I mean, if they can't compete, they can't compete. And I do want to reply to someone in the chat because I've been monitoring the chat.
Mm-hmm.
There is someone by the name of Scorch88
Yeah, I like
that
Scorch. He's an often viewer of my streams.
he states that he's leaving out the government is interfering. Well, the whole essence of this short little discussion we just had on this was based on the premise that the government was interfering. So I didn't really feel like I needed to put that nuance in there, because we were
Mm.
going off of the fact that Walmart, or other big corporations were eager to see a $15 an hour minimum wage. I don't even really know. I mean, how much of a market do you think would a small business take from these giant chain retailers? Because I don't really see much in my area. I guess maybe in bigger cities this could be the case, but
How much of it a statist? How much would it statistically affect? Is kind of what I think that you're getting at there. I don't base all my beliefs off of statistics. I believe base them in large part off of principles. That being, of course, in the minimum wage, like I mentioned, just mentioned my principle there, for private property rights, freedom of association, that kind of stuff. But statistically speaking, if you want to talk about statistics, I mean, I did actually read up that Seattle, they implemented $15 minimum wage, and it did not negatively affect them that much, but it did negatively affect them just a bit, in that restaurant workers and other low end workers, they got laid off, hours laid off or fired or whatever else have you. So
I think that's
that would be the statistical reasoning as to why I'm against the minimum wage. And there's something that I heard about New York implementing 15 an hour wage as well.
yes, yes.
But I would actually have to read up about the effect, but I've
Uh,
just heard
really,
hearsay about it.
I saw an article shared by someone. I can't say that I read it. That would be dishonest, but I did see the headline. I guess from the gist of the headline, people are a little bit upset of increased prices of foods.
Hmm.
Um,
And that's another side of the issue, is the inflation issue, but go on.
um, I think in regards to this, with people that are saying like, oh, businesses will just flee and outwork their work will be outsourced. I mean, corporations and stuff, they've been doing this for years. I mean, this is why Detroit's the state it's in right now. All the manufacturing jobs left because labor was cheaper elsewhere. It's just part of
Right.
the game. But, of course, um, say like if a business moves to a new location or they start laying people off and maybe a higher minimum wage location, yeah, of course this is going to be the case because it's in their best interest to save the money.
Hmm.
Um, so this is why, say like County A has a $15 minimum wage and County B, just the next door neighbor has 7.25. Yeah, of course it would be like a booming business hub. We're not saying like, and I'm not saying you, but we're not saying like certain places should increase the minimum wage. We're trying to see the effects of this in full scale, like of the whole nation, because at that point you really don't have anywhere to run. unless you had the money and the resources to outsource your work to like a different continent or a different country.
Yeah, that would be like the other side of the issue is Walmart going to China and India and so forth, putting factories in there for lower wage workers.
I mean, for the
But
most
if
part, though, Walmart has made already giant inroads into China and most of Africa. They have different
oh yeah,
locations there, but I mean,
that but on the point of you mentioning competition and people moving their business about, like I don't I cannot make a full on prediction as to how much people would move around their businesses and their buildings and whatnot, their places of business.
I would imagine
But
that would probably
I,
be
it,
costlier than. I'm sorry for cutting you off. My bad.
well, I don't know of how much it would do it if like the minimum wage was abolished or if we kept it in comparison. I don't know exactly, but I guess the principle behind that I have behind it is I don't think that the government should be artificially, you know, intervening and uh, mm, intervening in the market to where that people feel like they have to make the decision to move their businesses.
Okay.
If they're going to move their business, I think it should be of natural market causes and not because of the public sector intervening in the private sector so much.
Very well. Yeah.
And I also want to like mention when it comes to something like welfare because I do not know if that was something that you ever wanted to bring up and so forth. But the existence of welfare, like yeah, I don't think that people really, in all reality, have a natural right to someone else's money for welfare and so forth. But the existence of welfare, that's a positive right, and people's positive rights don't necessarily have to affect people's negative rights. Like if you were to like give food stamps to person A, that ain't going to affect person B in any way. But implementing a minimum wage so that person A gets their, the minimum wage, the wage that they feel like that they're entitled to, that's going to affect person B if person B is the manager or employer of person A. So, whatever positive rights is given to people, I definitely think it should not be affecting people's negative rights.
Okay.
So, on the issue of like say food stamps and other welfare, it's in some ways it's a tolerable compromise in my eyes. I just don't want people's negative rights of their, their business rights being affected. That being the minimum wage and so forth.
Right.
But at that point, it becomes more of a cost issue regarding government spending more than a rights issue. So we really like did quite the segue from immigration towards making this big interesting tangent about minimum wage. I was almost feeling like steering us back to immigration, but it's neither here nor there. It was an interesting tangent as well. Um, but I did not know if there was something that, in particular that you wanted to mention about machinery and automation.
Okay, so I recently saw some debates and arguments about this. Um, I guess people are right. I mean, yeah, from like a reactionary point of view, a lot of jobs would be taken over by machinery and electronics and software. Um, if a minimum wage was increased, I mean, we're already seeing this with like the McDonald's like self-serve kiosks and stuff. Um, but to be honest, it's gonna happen either way because I think, in my opinion, like I'm sure like some of these larger corporations definitely, I mean, and also self checkout as well. But a lot of these corporations probably have a lot of financial analysts that can probably predict how cost effective this would be in the future. Um, so either way, it's bound to happen. I'm sure you can make the case that a minimum wage set that high would definitely take out a lot of jobs. But I also feel like at this current point we have in technology, there are several jobs that this would not overtake. Like I can't really see right now a way that you could replace like a waiter or a waitress.
Hmm.
Definitely like assembly line and industrial jobs. Yeah, sure. Those would probably be the first to be hit. So like
Yeah.
if we still had large
And
sectors of
trucking,
trucking too. I mean, yeah,
possibly.
yeah, I get to that soon, but so like if a lot of these production jobs, because I see a lot of people saying like these jobs need to come back. I mean, for one, these jobs aren't coming back, but forcing a corporation, in my eyes, to stay in one location and like forbidding them to go anywhere else almost seems like one of the most anti-free market things I can think of.
Yeah,
But
I
I
agree.
could see like incentives from the government possibly to stay on American soil. That's one route we could take. But to be like iron fist about it, that's another thing. But even if they were iron fisted, iron
You
fisted,
make me think of the Marvel series.
if they were like if they were like swatted upon and told like you have to stay here, well, those
What
jobs
about
would be.
doxing people and swatting them? Sorry, go on. I didn't mean to derail you.
But if they were forced to stay within the borders of the United States, most of these manufacturing and factory jobs, they would have been gone overnight. You would see hundreds of factory jobs being replaced by robots. My dad saw this in the early 2000s when he worked at the AM plant in South Bend, Indiana, where he was working, not assembling the military Humvees, but doing maintenance on the robots that assembled
Hmm.
these. So I
So,
think if people like that were saying like, oh, we need to keep these places here no matter what and by force, well, like 100 jobs are going to be gone overnight, and you're going
mhm,
to see robots, and really, it's probably going to be two positions that are humans. So you're going to
yeah.
have a software dev making sure that the scripts are running accurately, and you're going to have maybe one or two maintenance people installing parts and doing repairs on these machines.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that I think that's like more in the far future though, because I think there would be a whole lot more software and hardware type people working on these machines. But that aside, and it seems like overall what you're trying to get at is that it seems kind of a moot point as to whether or not there's a minimum wage that it okay, because I think I know what you're getting at. The right constantly mentions about how raising the minimum wage would automate jobs more. But what you're
Yes.
saying is that it's kind of a moot point because even if the minimum wage is not raised, we're still going to get automation in the next few years.
Oh,
Massive automation.
definitely. I mean,
Well,
look at Tesla. I mean, they are prototyping, self-driving cars. I know it's embarrassing that I know this, and people often question the accuracy. But my fiance is really big into the whole beauty guru thing. Well, okay, so Jeffree Star has this whole video where he's applying his whole facial makeup routine while his Tesla is in autopilot mode. So I think within like the next 3 decades, I think a lot of reactionaries say it's never going to work. Well, a lot of people said that about the car. All right. So, what's going to happen is probably within the next 3 decades,
well,
automated vehicles. It's probably going to be high proliferation.
there might be a point to be made that it is a moot point either way, but there's still like the principle being against the minimum wage. Then this kind of segues our conversation onto the issue of UBI, Universal Basic Income. Like, what's your thoughts on UBI? Because a lot of people on the left they'd be saying because we're going to get massive automation and people are still going to need to eat and drink and have a place to live, so therefore give them a UBI and so on and so forth. What's your thoughts on UBI?
To be honest, I really haven't read up about that too much to really have an opinion on it.
Mm.
Maybe perhaps at this juncture, this probably isn't the best course to take. Um,
I don't think so either because of how freaking expensive it would be for starters.
okay. Um,
And
the,
Scorch, of course, says that there will be new
yeah,
jobs. Yeah, that's something that I kind of wanted to mention, Scorch, but thank you for mentioning it.
yeah, there will be new jobs, but what I'm trying to paint is like these people think that these jobs are going to stay, but for two, you're going to need higher qualifications for these jobs. Or for one, I mean, for two, the positions open would be vastly short.
You know, Another position that some people talk about, because I know that Conundrum has mentioned it one point when I interviewed him, is that even waiters and waitresses, their positions could possibly be automated as well. And so there's all the paranoia of the possibility of, we're just going to be surrounded by machines in all of our services and whatnot. But
Well,
Conundrum also mentions there's still going to be like a demand for that human touch, for that bit of actual social interaction. And I
yeah.
find myself to be one of those people. Like, I don't want to go to Amazon for every last bit of my product and whatnot. I got my green screen from Amazon, but overall, I like to go and visit in person people like the cashiers and whatnot, have social interaction as I'm getting my stuff that I want. Go on.
I mean, definitely. I would say that's sort of a personal preference thing.
Yeah, by all means, it is.
I'm sure the majority of people probably want, a human touch. Perhaps maybe big grocers would maybe cater to those needs and maybe have like, I'm not gonna say like, oh,
Some of them would be
they're gonna keep every aisle open or lane open for checkout, but I'm sure they would still exist, but there would definitely be probably a lesser amount. And then there are some
probably.
fields that machines really, at this point, cannot handle. I would say like customer support positions, definitely. I don't think a
Hmm.
machine could do that at this point.
Although there is all the automated call representatives that people ended up going to.
Yeah, most of the time, I feel like a lot of people probably go through that prompt until they can get to an option where they can speak to a representative. I mean,
Hmm.
sure, yeah, that probably erases a lot of receptionist jobs, but at the same time, that doesn't really, I don't know, from what I would think, that probably doesn't really affect a lot of actual like, let's say like IT support people or stuff of that nature.
Yeah, there's still going to be those people that would rather talk to a person than a machine with IT support or call representative jobs in general. Um, and on the point of there being less cashiers working, there might still be some human cashiers, but there's gonna still be less, like you mentioned. The question would be, would those same people leaving the cashier and retail industry, would they move on to like higher paying jobs like manufacturing industry and so forth?
Uh, I guess it's really up to the individual to decide. I would say there
Yeah.
should probably be incentives to retrain these people into time appropriate fields. I mean, we've been in like a mainly service economy for quite a while. I don't really think we've really been a major industrial hub probably since what our grandparents were entering the workforce, maybe.
Hmm.
So, I mean, for the past probably 30, 40 years, it's been primarily service industry jobs. I'm just thinking that we're going to see definitely a higher increase of a service economy. In fact, we might eventually become entirely, a service economy besides maybe armament manufacturers and stuff of that nature.
Right.
And probably possibly automobile manufacturers, but there's no saying where they're gonna go. I mean, I know Ford had those plans to move to Mexico and all that, but
Hmm. I think for things like car manufacturing and clothes designing and video gaming, those are all still going to have people behind them because
yeah,
I
those are
don't think there's an advanced enough AI to come up with the same creativity that a human can.
maybe in like 500 years, but
Try 5,000.
5,000 maybe. You never know.
YouTube being weird and glitched out. Okay. Um. Yeah. Anyway. Um. I kind of had another issue that I thought of bringing up. I mean, unless there was more you wanted to mention about automation.
I think I pretty much covered all bases in regards to that. I think I would say
Okay.
so. We can move on.
So, another thing that is mentioned often enough about immigration, like again, rewinding this back to immigration, is regarding the effects of crime. I just wanted to like know your opinions on that.
Um, in terms of crime, I mean, I would have to say I'm sure the people committing these crimes are probably already part of some sort of criminal enterprise themselves.
Hmm.
Um, to say that the average person coming over to the border is just gonna start like beheading people
Hmm.
and hold people at gunpoint, I think that's a bit of a reactionary view.
Oh yeah, I don't find at all the average person to be committed. The average immigrant, be it legal or illegal, is like committing crime to, or I don't think that it's a majority, much less a super majority of either one of those groups, to where that there could be a justified generalization of that.
And plus, like statistically speaking, even though this might be an issue, we are actually statistically at one of the lowest points of violent crime in our history. I think perhaps, I don't know if we've surpassed the figures yet or not, but we at least are on par with statistics from the other lowest recorded point, which would have been probably the 1960s around the JFK era. So we are technically very, very much down on violent crime. It's not like the 80s where it like blew up exponentially. It's
Hmm.
actually quite the opposite.
Right, because people can be pacified with technology. you
Yeah,
know,
the
so
robots
social
taking over.
social media and so forth. They can just rage out at the keyboard. You know that one GIF that some people share sometimes? It's just a person typing, and then he gets angrier and angrier until his hands like fall off, and then his arms fall off, and then he starts using his face to beat into the keyboard.
Yeah.
Instead, people are basically doing that instead of actually going on, shooting or bar fight and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's a large sector of the population that is probably inclined to like irrationally violent behavior over
Hmm.
small inconveniences, but
Yeah, I mean the media still sensationalizes it nowadays.
yeah, it'll probably always be that way. But I'd have to argue, like people who are like, oh, the legacy media is on its way out. I mean, sure, the figures say that, but they're probably also smart enough to start buying up like a lot of smaller like talk shows here on YouTube or like on the radio.
Hmm. Um. One thing that I have to say about illegal immigration and crime is that I've always have read that, well, at least there's one study in particular that I have read, or article rather, talking about how illegal immigrants specifically have a higher homicide rate than the rest of the country's population. So I mean, overall, the rates might be decreasing for all groups, as you kind of insinuated right there. But as far as I know, it's still kind of higher for illegal immigration and for illegal immigrants. And by the way, that's the separation that people forget to do when in the immigration debate.
Yes, yes.
So that they people on the left on this issue, they would like group together both illegals and legals and then say, oh, yeah, the crime rate is lower than the average, than the legal citizenry of the United States. Well, yeah, no shit. I mean, you're talking about the practically harmless legal immigrants that almost always look to keep their nose clean and so forth. And obviously, if you combine them with illegal immigrants, they are going to like massively decrease the numbers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess in this instance, we would have to take this by probably a case by case basis on why people are coming over here. I
Mm-hmm.
think we may have touched on that earlier on.
Yeah, you mentioned Mexico's economy.
Yeah. Um, I mean, if we're just coming over here to maybe further advance the agenda of like a criminal enterprise as stated before, I'm sure violent rates of crime are going to be higher within a specific population.
Yeah.
But I guess there are other measures we could take. I mean, that could also segue into, I mean, a large percentage of cartels obviously is drugs. We see how even on a small level, states that legalize, say, cannabis, it hurts the
Oh yeah.
cartels, bargaining power. And except actually, it's been reported that a lot of cartels have really just mainly given up on weed. That used to be like their hot ticket item. Now it seems like the focus is switching onto opiates. So it's very common to see opiate fields, opium poppy fields out in Mexico now, because that's the crop that's really, I would probably say, taking over the drug game in terms of illegal substances. So
Dang.
we could probably make the case that perhaps decriminalizing, I don't know, maybe would, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's another side of this debate that has to be tackled as well. Is if you were to like eradicate the drug war in the United States, that would make immigration less of an issue. Like I got mentioning getting rid of the minimum wage, that would make the whole illegal immigration debate less of an issue. But drugs as well, like decriminalize weed being the biggest one, the most popular one for the United States. But even all the harder drugs, as much as we don't want people to take those kinds of drugs, it would still hurt the cartels, and therefore there would uh, cooperatively there would be like a decrease in violent crime as well.
Definitely.
I'm
I
all
can't.
for getting rid of the drug war.
I would say so as well.
I mean, you smoke it yourself, so.
Well, I have. Actually, I haven't smoked since almost a year ago, I would say.
Dang.
I've been keeping my nose clean for a long time. Um, yeah, I remember those good old days coming onto like S-Man streams, like drunk and high at the same time. Those are fun. But
Way back in 17.
yeah, I made a bit of a reputation for myself, but
Yep.
but
Uh,
I don't know. I don't know in terms of
Smoking
like.
weed is like forever, uh, like molded to your character,
Oh yeah,
glued to
definitely.
your personality.
Oh, definitely, dude. Oh, definitely. It's always gonna be attached to me now.
That's
I'm never living that one down.
definitely with the stoner voice.
But I don't know. In terms of legalization of drugs, I don't know. I don't know about maybe like hard drugs, maybe like heroin and opiates in general, and methamphetamines and stuff of that nature.
Oh yeah,
I
meth.
don't know. I don't know if I would be totally in favor of totally legalizing that. I've heard some very good arguments, but
Mm.
at the same time, I don't really know if the state should be really allowing this to be happening, because it seems like it would be very detrimental to your workforce. I mean,
Uh huh.
I can see substances like cannabis. I mean, it really doesn't inhibit you too much. I mean, you're not going to build a physical dependency. You can build a physical dependency to alcohol, but I would say since that's so culturally
Right.
ingrained in our culture, I mean, you're going to have a horrible time. I mean, they already tried doing that almost a century ago, so.
I think I'm starting to find out that I'm more extroverted when I drink. Well,
Yeah.
internet is a little bit of a different game. Like I'm obviously more chatty
Oh,
on
definitely.
live streams than I am in like person. And Scorch88 says legalize it all. Like as far as like those harder drugs go, I ultimately don't think that the government has any business like dictating as to whether or not people can like take cocaine or even meth and whatnot. As I don't want
Yeah.
people to do it, but at the same time, I don't want people to be doing suicide. But at the same time, I do think that suicide is a person's own personal right, as
Oh, definitely.
uncomfortable as it is to say that, but that is just my principle. And I don't think that there should be like any laws really on suicide, just in the same way that I think that there should be any laws regarding a drug that is useful for nothing except a slow way to suicide. And this would also include cigarettes as well.
Oh,
But
definitely.
on the other hand, on the other hand, I think it's like one of those lower tier issues for me. Like whether or not methamphetamines and cocaine and all those other drugs get legalized, I don't care that much. I mean, especially in compared to gun rights, economic rights, abortion, and all those other issues. Like gun rights and economic and abortion, they're way up here. Um, Weed is kind of somewhere in the middle. but cocaine and heroin, they're like way down here.
Yeah, yeah.
But I definitely do think that, I mean, drug war, I believe in decriminalizing that, but it's not because so much that I care for whether or not people take cocaine. It's more of a cost issue, the way I look at it.
I mean, I guess for me, I see it more as in like maybe pharmacological benefits, perhaps. So like yeah, you can smoke weed and it does do wonders for one's like mental health. It's pretty good for combating depression, anxiety, all those things. And you can't really, like we said before, you might have like a minute to moderate like mental addiction to the substance, but you can't really have a physical dependency.
Mm.
Then we have like nicotine. I guess that's another one where it's just like so ingrained in the culture you really couldn't do anything about. I mean, I've suffered from nicotine addiction myself. This is one that will totally
Nick,
reroute. It basically depletes your stress hormone. I want to say it's epinephrine. Um, so basically, your body becomes completely reliant on nicotine because I guess
nicotine decreases your stress. It sounds like
be,
what you're about to say there.
I mean, yes, it decreases your stress. Basically, your brain and your body is unable to produce this hormone with the introduction of nicotine into your body. Then we have the instances of, say, meth and heroin where they completely reroute your brain in almost unrepairable ways because there are people that take years and years and years to get over something like a methamphetamine
Doesn't
addiction.
doesn't cannabis and marijuana and CBD have an even heavier effect against stress than nicotine, though?
Uh, yeah, I mean, definitely it would be, it would have a greater effect on alleviating stress.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just the fact that nicotine becomes physically prone to become physically dependent. Then there's like the instance, like I was saying, with like meth and heroin, where it's almost unrepairable. Because we're talking
Right.
about substances here that basically overramp your dopamine channels and flood your brain with dopamine, which is basically the 10th degree to unnatural. So this is why people who do meth just once in their life and they put it down, they have a come down that lasts about a month in time before their brain can recoup. Uh, you can also experience about halfway into this suicidal thoughts. This is
Uh,
the same for more amphetamine based analogs like just
meth makes a
amphetamines.
person suicidal.
Um, Technically, due to
I'm
what
not
it
so sure
has,
if I heard that right. That's why I'm asking.
well, the effects afterwards. I'm saying like even if you smoked it one time, it's been documented that people around the halfway point of this month come down period, they do become increasingly suicidal. They have suicidal thoughts. They're very depressed.
Uh,
They sleep a bunch. Their dopamine stores are totally, basically clinched and restricted after smoking meth. The same as pretty similar with heroin. Heroin is, and I haven't read too much up on the opiates for a while, but it is the most addictive substance. It is definitely one of those where one time could be it for you and you're addicted. But it does follow the same type of pathway where it does ramp up your dopamine flow in your brain to an ungodly, unnatural level. But there are some
yeah.
misconceptions, say with like nicotine. So if I sat out a crack pipe in front of you and a cigarette, uh, you smoking the cigarette and you smoking the crack pipe, you would have a six time higher chance of being addicted to nicotine than crack cocaine after the first try.
Hmm. Yeah. This is like
My field of expertise.
Yeah. This is becoming quite educational right here. Like, it's becoming in the same vein as like my interview with Chris Kerr or Chris Kerr. How do you pronounce his last name? Jeeps
Oh
Creeps.
yeah. Oh, I'm familiar with him. I remember when he ripped Mjollnir Man to shreds, but that's the name that shall not be named. So,
You call him Shim. Call him Shim.
Shim. Okay.
By the way, I like the nice Windows 98 shirt that you have on there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Classics, man. Those are the
Classic.
days of Command and Conquer, Age of Empires, all those other classic RTSs.
Oh, dude, I still have Age of Empires 2 on my computer. I play it a lot.
You got the remastered version from Steam?
No, actually, it's an original CD copy.
Ah.
No Steam attached, but
no, no.
I do love Steam. I play a lot of strategy games. It's basically mostly what I play, and then probably FPS,
And
and then
Scorch says StarCraft. Yeah, don't forget Warcraft as well. All awesome pioneers of the RTS genre. But yeah, I don't know if there was much more that I had to ask or talk about. Whatever I had, is probably forgotten at this point. Though there is at least one more thing that I do know I wanted to ask. Like, who do you think that you are supporting for president in 2020, or do you know?
Mm. I have not come to that conclusion. I can say that all of the DNC candidates are total dumbasses. Even as a left-wing speaker. To be honest with you, I do foresee a Trump 2020 re-election.
You
Something
what?
I may not. I definitely will. I'm putting my prediction out right now. I definitely see Trump getting reelected. I
Okay,
definitely see it.
but you don't support him?
No, I don't support Donald Trump.
I know that there
Uh,
was a point that you did,
there
because
was.
watching your older videos,
I was a very right-wing individual for a long time.
back when
Um,
you were a Styx clone.
I was a six clone. I will fully admit to that. Now I can't really listen to Styx. I don't know if you've seen his debate
He
with
can be a bit of a blowhard sometimes.
if you've seen his debate with Destiny. You know Destiny, Omni Destiny, that
I
streamer.
know Destiny. He's like the left wing habitual debater.
Yeah, if you ever, he goes on this debate with Tonka Saw on Andy Warski's live stream with Andy himself, and then I think Styx joins in at a later time.
So wait, there's Andy, Destiny, Tonkasaw, and Styx all in the same stream.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically, I don't think Styx conduct was that well. It kind of reminded me of how I used to like crash fucking S-Man's live streams all the time by being drunk. So basically, Styx got. I mean, he says he was just tipsy, but he sounded completely obliterated.
Yeah, I mean, okay, there might have been a time of where that I did think, oh yeah, this is a guy that I can respect, Styx. I mean, but that was like looking back at the Styx versus Sargon versus Spencer debate, or it was more like Styx and Sargon versus Spencer, or Spencer, or excuse me, Styx was playing some kind of in between candidate, however you want to look at it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like one of the biggest times I thought Styx made the most sense and whatnot. He
Yeah.
was him arguing against the white ethno state and so on.
I do say
Oh, that is
that
another issue. I forgot to write that down. Talking about the Holocaust and all those, and that issue of your videos being taken down. But
that is
what are you
yeah,
saying?
we can discuss that, and I guess this will be a nice segue into it. That is just one of the many qualms I have with Styx as of now. I think some of my biggest are him basically being a crypto fascist.
Hmm.
He has definitely espoused many anti-Semitic views in the past. He has made about
Really?
like four different versions of like, I wouldn't say Holocaust denying, but definitely significantly and grossly underplaying what happened in the Holocaust. He made about four versions of that same video within the span of 3 years, maybe five
What
at
was
most.
the videos talking about specifically?
Basically, he is debating. Basically, he does not really understand how Zyklon B works. He is saying that gas chambers probably weren't the most reasonable way to kill people, and maybe that might be the case. But Zyklon B, we will get into basic chemistry in just a second. Um, these are all like 6-year-old videos now, and maybe at most 3-year-old videos. They have all turned up missing on Styx's channel.
Hmm.
He also likes to make very
Probably unlisted them or something.
very big implications. Like he's in the past, instead of saying Jewish people dubiously, he said like, oh, these dubiously European and Caucasian people, or when the establishment pointed its nose down at people, and let me emphasize a very large nose. I mean, it's very hard. And when Styx was confronted with that one, apparently he said this was a harmless reference to Pinocchio, but that remains to be seen. As far
Wait,
as
what the
Zyklon,
fuck?
yeah,
I mean, unless you're like talking about a specific politician that you think is a big time liar, I don't see where the implication is with that, Sticks.
as far as Zyklon B goes, yes, it was used as a delousing agent, and definitely because you know people were getting typhus because everything was being bombed and blown up everywhere, and fleas were coming everywhere. So typhus was a very big epidemic, and he may be right where it may have been used until maybe the 1960s, but the fact of the matter is they soon realized that this was an effective killing agent because Zyklon B is usually around 70 to 80% hydrogen cyanide. So once this
Hmm.
is mixed with water vapor, because they did put it in the showers, once this is
Yeah.
mixed with water, it creates basically poisonous fumes. This is part of the reason why these shower halls in Auschwitz were hermetically sealed. I also have a huge problem with people revising it to say, yeah, they had recreational baseball teams and swimming pools that were open to the public. The thing is, though, Auschwitz itself is a very massive complex that had three different detention centers in it. So there was Auschwitz 1, that was primarily the opening camp where you would get processed into a different camp, and the people who stayed there were generally political prisoners to a large extent. Auschwitz 3 Marowitz. This was mainly a labor camp for manufacturing, where German corporations would lease out the space and use this cheap, um, essentially slave labor.
Right.
Basically, the most notorious one is Auschwitz II Birkenau, which was mainly the extermination camp for the Jewish population, where an overwhelming majority of the population was Jewish, and this was also had more so agricultural forced labor. So most of the time, Jews would end up in Auschwitz II Birkenau, and I think you can understand from the point I'm making which complex did not have these recreational swimming pools and sports leagues.
Hmm. I don't know. Perhaps what they're seeing is that the first one that you mentioned, of where that they were mostly political prisoners, maybe that's where that they had the more recreational stuff. Whereas the other two that sound a whole lot harsher, as what you kind of described them, did not have any of that stuff.
Definitely, and it is a naive notion to state that all camps in the Holocaust were solely extermination camps, because that's solely not the place, or not the case. I mean,
Yeah, they're right.
for
They were like used either for slave labor or extermination. That's kind of
and
what I
sure,
always thought it to be.
definitely a guard could just walk up to you at any moment and kill you if they saw fit. That is definitely the case, and that probably happened a lot more
Mm-hmm.
times than documented. And you can't really get a rough number on people killed, because at this time, especially with the Jews, Nazi Germany was trying to erase everything. So they would barge into these halls and basically burn every shred of documentation ever. Um, now,
Well, they
like I
burned
said,
their own books. What else do you expect?
with this being said, though, I have ancestors on both sides that have fallen because of the Holocaust. On my paternal side, there is a person that was very high in the occult circles of the Nazi Party. His name is Karl Ernst Kraft. He is a Swiss occultist that basically they were using his knowledge in predictive astrology um, to aid in Nazis' predictions of victory, defeat, and what steps they should take. So he actually predicted Hitler's an attempt on Hitler's life. I don't know if you're familiar with the Berlin Beer Hall bombing. Um, he wrote to someone
Hmm.
that was under the direct orders of Rudolf Hess, saying that there will be an attempt on Hitler's life on November 8th. Hitler actually left about 15 to 10 minutes before the hall exploded.
Eh.
Another instance is he was actually, when he was under the Ministry of Propaganda, he was tasked with basically trying to use Nostradamus' writings in order to predict the victory of Germany. Basically, he was trying to tell people because he basically had spoken with and had mostly direct contact with Rudolf Hess. Um, he was trying to tell him that there would be a horrible outcome for Germany if they did not end the war in 1939. And he was definitely against the idea of them invading Russia because he foresee a horrible defeat.
Hmm.
Basically, to bring the story full circle, he was arrested by the Gestapo and he died contracting typhus on the way to the Buchenwald concentration camp, which was primarily for political prisoners. But, anyways, I've totally derailed from my original topic of Zyklon B. As I stated before, this is definitely a very harmful chemical, being 80% at most hydrogen cyanide. So with this, when this is released, this releases a poisonous, noxious gas um, type of vapor, I guess you could say, when it meets up with water, and they just used to shove these in the shower heads. So basically, a huge cloud of hydrogen cyanide gas would come in and kill people because, sure, if you touch dry hydrogen cyanide, as this was usually used to sanitize people, typically not much would happen to you. They had a very specific process. I can't remember exactly on how to clean this off of people, but as we know, a lot of serial killers they like using this as a mixture with water because it is so toxic that it can actually seep through your pores and kill you within usually about a couple days.
Hmm.
Combine this with you're being totally covered in hydrogen cyanide water and you're breathing in this vapor, you are going to die pretty quickly. They would really open it for a few hours, because they wanted this waste to basically settle to the ground level so they could clean it up pretty easily. That is, I guess, a little crash course in Cyclone B. But as far as my channel, they took the video down and they've now ejected 2 appeals. I don't know whether or not I should just delete it because the strike, I guess, isn't going away until November 3rd. I still have the total right to live stream on my channel, and I have a lot of videos
Okay.
sent.
So it's not like you're in S man's position that he
I'm
often
definitely
was.
in the first 5 years. This is in 5 years of making videos on this account. This is the only time where I've had a community guidelines issue.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know whether to just keep appealing this till they listen because it seems like it's getting nowhere. But I have a lot of videos planned that I was planning that I could definitely see a possible violation of TOS in YouTube's eyes because of their totally ridiculous and nebulous and vague system. But I'm not sure if I can really post these on here now because I had a spicy one concerning my home state of Indiana where there's actually a documented sex offender who performed fellatio on a blind
Ooh.
12-year-old boy who is attempting to construct a pedophile commune in my state.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Shit. I feel like editing in the description now hashtag free Mjollnir Man just so that he can like have his anti-Holocaust denying video up.
It is
Excuse me.
just very ludicrous to me. I opened a BitChute account, which seems like a lot of terminated accounts for far right extremists and ethno state sympathizers go to make videos now because half the time I see a lot of anti-Jewish videos.
Really.
But it does seem to be a little bit of hope. But for the most part, it seems to be predominantly dominated by either very zealous Christians or very, very, very big names in the alt right community.
Or very libertarian, economically libertarian people like the ANCAPs and so forth.
Oh, definitely them too. It just seems like an overwhelming majority of the content is politically aimed, and the overwhelming majority of that content is definitely on the right wing. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean it
I don't see a
depends on
problem with it.
it depends on what kind of right wing you are because things like ethnostatism, I will comfortably say that it is like far right. I mean, you can be a leftist and be for an ethno state. I mean, take a look at black nationalist socialists, for example. Um, they want their black no state, but at the same time they want a far left economic system such as socialism. So
Yeah,
yeah,
sort
and
of like that Godzi Kozo individual, I
yeah,
believe his name is. Yeah, okay, yeah, I get the gist of that. Yeah.
talking about political spectrums as well, and since we're kind of on the issue of the alt right as well, I cannot comfortably. I mean, I know a lot of people call the alt right the far right and so forth, and I will say that they are far right, socially speaking, in particular. But can a person really comfortably call them just in general far right? Because economically speaking, they aren't that far right. Richard Spencer, I think, advocates for some kind of single payer healthcare system, for minimum wage, and he's at least somewhat pro choice. The only issue that really puts him as being far right is his beliefs on race and immigration.
I
But I
guess
guess those kind of
maybe
vastly overwhelm all the other issues because he's not as extreme on those other issues. Sorry, go on.
perhaps if we had like a political compass, I guess we could probably lump them in as probably center authoritarian right at
Yeah.
most. I wouldn't say that they definitely. I mean, there's a huge distinction to be made between, say, like anarcho-capitalist and then an ethno-statist.
Mm.
I mean, I guess a technicality, they probably would be placed on the same, half of the political compass, but definitely in very, very opposite directions.
Yeah. Mm.
I mean, sure, I don't like Humane Mind, and I think he's a stinky fart smeller, but at the same time, I definitely would not put him on the same level as, say, Richard Spencer, even
Yeah.
if Humane Mind is possibly a race realist, I believe at this point. Which
Richard Spencer is a
that's a
race
whole.
realist.
Yeah, but it wasn't Humane Mind like sort of sympathetic to that for a while, if I remember correctly?
Um, I don't think he's sympathetic with the political side of race realism, and that you're supposed to advocate for like be against interracial marriage and be for an ethno state and all that other kinds of bull crap. I think the only thing that he agrees with is the statistics regarding IQ. That's it. But he doesn't use that as like a crutch to generalize black people as being stupid or so on and so forth, which is kind of ironic because he doesn't use the whole IQ stats to give a gross generalization about black people, but he uses a minority of pedophiles in the LGBT community to put a gross generalization upon the LGBT community. It's kind of ironic, and as far as I know, yeah. Anyways, go on.
I mean, that goes under the premise that IQ is just naturally inherited.
Yeah, I
I mean,
don't think
sure,
it
we
is.
have genetic clusters that would definitely indicate um, whether someone would have a high propensity to be either extremely intelligent or above the level of what would be considered average IQ.
I
But
think IQ is more cultural and
yeah,
geographical because if you take a look at black people in sub Sahara Africa, but then take a look at black people in America, they do have a considerably higher IQ, which kind of goes to show that over the generations, the average IQ of the black American has kind of increased over time ever since being taken over here forcefully via the slave trade and so on and so forth.
yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
I mean,
not genetic to everybody out there.
yeah. As we have possible genetic indicators, um, it sort of displays somewhat of a lack of knowledge in genetics because when we talk in terms of genetics, we have to put everything in probability. So, if I have like a genetic cluster to say be I would have like a high probability to be less intelligent than the average. I wouldn't say this is concrete proof that you are less intelligent than the average in IQ. Um, and also culturally speaking, say like, we can make the case that sure, on average, perhaps like Asian Americans tend to do more well off. Maybe Indian Americans tend to do well more off than possibly white people, but this is due to upbringing as well and the culture surrounding them. So, in a lot of places in East Asia, higher education and academic success has historically been super ingrained into the
Right.
culture.
So
Um,
therefore, that is why that Asians, like on average, get to having a higher IQ than
Definitely.
everyone
So,
else.
so the whole argument really shouldn't be based around race. I could see how someone could strew it to make it look like that, but at the same time, this is more of an argument between is IQ concrete or is it fluid?
I would agree that it is the latter.
Because I mean, if we're taking world statistics, I don't want to generalize all of Africa because obviously there are very well off places in Africa, but at the same time, there are places in Africa where they're totally war torn. There are
Mm-hmm.
gigantic conflicts that barely get any Western press coverage, such as maybe like the Congolese War was probably one of the most notable in recent history. But I think if you're living in a war torn society that isn't stable, you really don't have access to a lot of academic outlets in the first place. There are people in Syria that leave school at age like 11 to go fight. You know, obviously that is going to hinder your capability of IQ.
By the way, I was just chuckling at something in the chat. Was all. I wasn't chuckling at you. Um,
I didn't even catch it.
but I will say that there do seem like just on the surface like a few countries in Africa that seem fairly well off. I mean, uh, if you're like me and you ever go searching on YouTube, like say for example, hot curvy black woman or something like that, you end up with
So
the you end
that's
up.
how you get your jollies off. You go watch those Nat Geo documentaries, and your
Yeah,
boobies are
sure.
flapping all over the place.
You end up with the search results of finding all these I guess one could say essentially black African queens essentially.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All the curvy ones, they would be like popular on social media and so forth, and a good portion of them like come from Ghana, uh,
Yeah.
and I think Cameroon has a few of those types as well, and just yeah. Although I don't hear of any from like say a place like Swaziland or Maui, or places like that. Somalia, Somalia would be an example of not so well off.
Somalia, I would also probably say Sudan is probably, or I guess North and South Sudan at this point. That is
Yeah.
definitely probably one of the worst places in Africa, maybe besides Somalia at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Swaziland is basically just a kingdom, and it's totally ass backwards. They actually have something and I don't remember because I believe in South Africa there's Swaziland and then there's Lesotho, and I can't remember
Mm.
if one of those countries, but it's definitely one of those countries that have a really ass backwards king, and every year he has a new wife, so he he just basically forcefully marries these people. So and, in ass backward places like that, definitely you're probably not looking at places that would probably value education. Um, I mean, the first time I ever saw race realism, it just kind of seemed pretty easy to
Mm.
tear apart. But then you have people like Stefan Molyneux or other people that you know.
Yeah, it's I don't know. In my point of view, I don't know if you ever watched my interviews with Liberal Sanity Project and whatnot, but
I believe I saw maybe the first portion of the latest one you've done with him.
yeah,
I,
but in like I did at least two live streams with him, and in the first one he was kind of making the argument against the whole average IQ thing. He kind of thinks that there is a point to be made against the whole IQ argument, and more power to him if he can make like a cohesive debunkery of average IQs. But when he was like on that live stream trying to tell me how it is like disproven, how it can be disproven, it did not make as much sense. I don't really think. But when race realists they go talking about the average IQs and all the math and whatnot, it seems just on the surface kind of hard to debunk in my opinion. Although obviously that is not to again that is not to make a generalization or anything like that.
well, yeah, definitely, and in full disclosure, not a racist, but when I first heard this, I
Hmm.
was like, this is kind of interesting. I should probably check it out some more. But then things just started kind of adding up to me because it
Oh,
seems like these places of low IQ are
I think
rather unfavorable parts of the world to be in at this point.
I think the first time that I'd ever heard the term race realism was when I saw a video of where that Jared Taylor was like doing a call-in interview with Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. You know, Mr. White male, the way that he be pronouncing white and
Oh
so forth.
yeah, yeah.
Jared Leto,
He's got a very
Jared Taylor.
very big following on BitChute right now.
Oh shit. But anyway, Jared Taylor, some of the arguments that he'd be mentioning, like he was just making. I can't remember exactly what he was making. Like, I don't like Cenk Uygur, but at the same time, there was some arguments that Jared Taylor was making right there that were just complete and utter turnoffs. Like he was just making an issue in of itself that there would be more minorities in the country. I'm just thinking to myself, why do I care? So
uh,
I was always kind of on edge about race realism, quote
I mean,
unquote.
even as a leftist, I really can't stand Cenk Uygur. He's an idiot in my opinion. But there
Yeah,
are some unsavory people in my opinion that do make an occasional good point. Um,
yeah.
namely, I think one of the biggest examples is probably Warcorp 666. He does bring up an occasional point every once in a while, but it just goes to show that I guess it's a little bit more gray than black and white. I think people have a high propensity to cast off everything someone is saying is wrong just because of who they are. But
Mm,
I don't even know where I was going with that. That just kind of went out of left field. But
yeah, it's all right. So I guess if I may ask, what do you see your channel going from here on out in regards to the alt right? Like, are you gonna like turn your channel into kind of an anti alt right channel,
um,
kind
I
of like
don't.
how LSP has?
I don't. I wouldn't say I want to do that. That's definitely not something I want to do. I would say that there will be a high influx of content. I mean, I already began kind of doing this back in like spring of 2017 and late winter of 2017. Um, I definitely have seen a lot of figures in the alt right that I took a lot of issues with. The first one I think I ever really had an issue with was a gentleman by the name of Kurt Klemansky, who now goes by MGTOW Kurt on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen his videos. He kind of talks in an accent. I don't know if he's from European descent or not. He lives in the States, but he became alt right and MGTOW fairly recently being probably the last 3 or 4 years, and he was making content about how people need to keep their bloodlines pure. I made a response
Oh,
video
jeez.
basically saying like if you're a MGTOW, why are you even concerned with this for one? Um that was basically my biggest gripe, but that's probably my first interaction with kind of combating this alt-right bullshit, which that would probably be either February or January of 2017. So I wouldn't say that I'm going to put all my efforts into it. It definitely will probably
Right.
be a significant chunk of my content, at least for the time being. I feel like once the 2020 election is done, I might shift commentaries a bit differently after that. Um, but I do want to do that, and basically what I was doing before, but obviously now with a different political stance, I do plan to have more commentaries and such on my channel.
Yeah.
I
I
Yeah, I
actually.
just don't want to pigeonhole myself into being like, oh, he's the anti alt right guy, you know.
Right. I mean, honestly, I don't think the alt right is that big of an issue, that influential as some internet lefties like to make them to be. I mean, they're still like a super minority of the population in both Europe and America. But to all the people that do go out there responding to the alt right in a cohesive way, like I find LSP to do overall, more credit to them. I mean, I'll obviously get a kick out of it because I consider myself to be fairly against the alt right as well, especially on the more political and legal side of things. But
Yeah.
I've only done like two things against the alt right and that kind of far right beliefs when it comes to race. Like one video in particular, it was a response video to Muhammad Ali when it came to interracial marriage. Like oddly enough, Muhammad Ali back in the 80s, he did like an interview where he was like speaking out against interracial marriage, and a few things that he mentioned, he was like bringing up birds, for example, like how bluebirds stick with bluebirds and redbirds stick with redbirds and so on and so forth. We're supposed to be smarter than them, but they go doing this. Like, is that supposed to be self-explanatory as to how they are taking a smarter action than us just because they are like sticking with their own color and so forth? I did not actually say that in the video, but what I found particularly ridiculous is when he brought up music tastes. Like, Jamaicans are going to want to listen to Jamaican music, and Asians are going to want to listen to Asian music. Something along those lines. And if you have like two people of two different races marrying, they're going to have like two different tastes in music, and so they're just going to be colliding and clashing and so forth. And I was like, oh, really? So it's not possible for people of race, different races to have a different taste in music that goes against their own stereotypically held music.
Oh my
I
god.
guess that means I give up on interracial marriage then. And then I was
Oh
like,
my god.
wait a minute. As I gone putting up a picture of Jimi Hendrix, Carlos Santana, and Eminem, people that defy their own racial stereotypes in music.
It's um, I mean, I think I vaguely remember this video, but I just don't remember watching it. Um, that just seems like a total like one-dimensional view of the world.
Yeah,
I
I
mean
mean,
that's at the point, and I don't want to sound elitist, but it almost sounds like something that would just be totally beneath me to try to argue.
yeah, more power to you, I guess. But I just found it to be low-hanging fruit at the time, and it was utterly stupid. And I cannot believe that the interviewer that Muhammad Ali was being interviewed by did not have the balls to speak out on more of the dumb points I was bringing up. And a guy named Howdy Y'all in the chat says, I'm Mexican and I prefer African American rap. And Scorch says, I'm white and I love Japanese music. You fucking weeb. But
I come from a very musical background, so I pretty much listen to everything.
But yeah, I haven't dabbled that much in responding to the alt right. There was that one video that has like almost 200 views, I think, and then of course I did like a joined on one of Humane Mind's live streams, responding like to Richard Spencer's claims in the Sargon debate, in his debate against Sargon.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
Humane Mind, he was actually, I mean, as many problems as we have with Humane Mind, he was actually in the right with that live stream. Like that is one of his high moments right there. Was responding to Richard Spencer's dumbass claims and so forth. Like
Yeah.
props to him, and I'm glad to have joined it. But those, like, really the only two times. I mean, maybe I ought to make some more response videos, but I just never really had the gumption to.
Yeah, I totally understand that too. For me, I feel like I have more of a responsibility to, just for the fact being that I am a person of Jewish ethnic descent, not
Right.
entirely, but it still, I guess, would be a not unnoticeable, you know, portion of me. But it's just concerning to me to see that there's people on public platforms such as YouTube that are advocating for ethno states and advocating. I mean,
Mm.
ever since I came out and just said it, a lot of people on the alt right have come onto my channel and wished for like another Showa or have threatened to kill me. But that's nothing new. I've had a lot of people in regards to the John Ramirez saga that have come at me for that. Um, I just dropped something. Anyways, um, I just feel like I have more of a duty to. It's just concerning to me to see individuals on
Right.
YouTube in 2019. I know current year fallacy, but whatever. Say that you know the white people have the right to secure their own state through violent means. When we have people like Tara McCarthy saying like, "Yeah, we should be allowed to hold them at gunpoint if necessary," it kind of comes off as
Mm.
concerning to me.
Yeah. Although I would think that it was early 2018 and late 2017 where the alt-right were apparently more prevalent, but that's neither here nor there. If the arguments are out there and need to be responded to, well then by all means respond to them.
Definitely, yeah.
But anyway, we are coming up on 2 hours here, so I think we are going to wrap this up. Mjollnir Man, anything that you like to say in closing?
I guess the only thing I really have to say is if you enjoyed me blabbering for 2 hours, you can check out my channel. The support would be much more appreciated, or very much appreciated, I mean. Um, and I guess stay tuned because I'm coming back into this YouTube game full swing. So,
All right. Yeah, everybody subscribe to Mjollnir Man. He already has a lot of subscribers, but unfortunately, I think a good portion of those might be ghost subscribers at this point because not very many active subscribers. If I'm to just be kind of bluntly honest, Austin.
oh yeah, I've definitely come to that conclusion. I mean, it's really my fault because I took that long of a hiatus for one, but for two,
Yeah.
I feel like I had so much different types of content on my channel that there were different people subscribing for different things. And
Yeah.
once you stop making certain types of content, people lose interest.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, for everybody out there, it has been exactly a week since I last done anything on my channel, but I do have another collab response video with S-Man coming up here soon. It'll definitely
Oh
get done.
my goodness.
It'll definitely get done before the end of the month. Will it get done within this week? I don't know for certain. Next weekend, I will not be having any live streams or anything like that because I got plans then. But join this channel 2 weekends from now when we are going to be having a live stream talking about the 2020 election and what candidates should people be supporting and why, for what reason. And hopefully we'll have Austin the Mjollnir Man on here again
Yep.
for that.
Yep. If no emergencies permit and there is no sudden change of plans, I do plan to be attending this one.
All right. And so, for all of you who are watching, thank you, Scorch, for contributing so much in the chat. And to all you watching, I'm the Dark Conservatarian. This is my guest, Mjollnir Man. See y'all later. Have a good evening, good night, and God bless. Peace.